The components pillar is the stereotypical thought of what design systems designers do. So you're probably all really familiar with this, but components are the individual reusable elements of a design system, playing a crucial role in creating consistent and scalable design solutions. They facilitate efficient design and development processes, ensuring that our designs are cohesive and maintain a high standard of quality. So I put a couple of examples here, like buttons, form fields, navigation bars, modals, things like that. I think if you've designed for any period of time, you know what components are. But these elements, when well designed and implemented, provide a solid foundation for building user interfaces. Delving into the elements of components, we focus on three key areas. So design, specs, and testing. In terms of design, visual consistency is paramount, ensuring that all components have a uniform appearance. Accessibility is also a crucial factor, as our components must meet accessibility standards to ensure that they are usable by all individuals. Just an extra nugget there, like I know we hear a lot about accessibility when it comes to WCAG and having to meet the AA or AAA standards. One of the things that's also really important to do is accessibility testing if you are able. So if you can do accessibility testing, please do, and add that as additional accessibility requirements that you gather over time. So just a little side note on accessibility, that is highly important. Like don't miss that piece of information. But next we have the specs, which involve creating detailed documentation for each component, using standardized templates to ensure consistency. And lastly, we have testing, which includes usability testing to ensure the components work well for users, and performance testing to check for efficient performance across different platforms. So one more area that of course you could test that we just mentioned is that accessibility testing. There are lots of tools out there. The one that we use on my team is called Fable. So if you need a resource, definitely look into them. Again, these are potential deliverables from our focus on components. And for the assets piece, some key assets for the components will be a component spec template, which provides a standard format for documenting components, as well as a detailed component spec for each element. So for the tangible assets, the main output from a component pillar is the spec itself. That component spec tells you all of the decisions that were made for a given component and outlines how that should be developed, and even how it should be designed in Figma. So some people kind of put those two things together. They're like, hey, I created this component in Figma. When I create the spec, it's already there. That's great, but we still want to make sure that we can see that spec as a source of truth and make sure that any components that we build meet the expectation that we have within that spec template. Some of the process deliverables will include usage guidelines that offer best practices for using components, methods for component specs that detail how to document and specify components, and design and engineering handoff guidelines that ensure smooth transitions from design to development. And then you'll see an overarching piece of documentation that comes in all of them. I'm kind of saving that to the end, but just know that there are documentation outputs from each one of these pillars as well. But I would say the key process for components will be that design and engineering handoff guideline. Just because you create a spec doesn't mean that that has all of the information that developers need to effectively build that component, especially with plugins that exist today. Like I know a popular one is the 8Shape specking tool. It is a fantastic plugin, but for your own dev team's specific needs, there may be other things that they're looking for within that spec. So never assume, always make sure that you talk with your developers and make sure that anything that you include in your spec or in the handoff doc is approved by them and that they've had a say in what goes in that.